Little Archie, issue 77, Real Super. Sabrina says Hilda got a job delivering pizzas. Hilda says that the best part of this job is when you get hungry, somehow thinking that she's allowed to eat some of the pizza. And she's implying that she does this on a regular basis. She'd have gotten fired a while ago, and she can't be this stupid. She'd just zap up pizza herself if she was hungry. I guess she plans on zapping up a replacement for that pizza. Then some criminals out of nowhere tell her that all they want from Hilda is her money. All they got from her was a quarter in pizza boxes. Hilda got fired for being mugged. I guess her boss assumed she was lying and ate all of the pizzas, but still. She didn't need to be written as a pizza delivery person. She could have just been written as a mugging victim. She says that it all happened so fast, which is what explains why she didn't have the time to use her magic. That still doesn't explain why she didn't zap up replacement pizza boxes instead of getting fired. Also, she'd teleport the muggers to her and make them get terrorized with her magic. This writing isn't even trying to make sense. Zelda shows Hilda another headline reporting on a crime wave hitting Riverdale. Hilda says something should be done about all of this crime, and Zelda says they need a superhero. This gives Hilda the idea to give herself a superhero costume and start trying to be a superhero. The brown-haired guy who robbed her says he ate the whole thing, but there's one pie left. Hilda shows up, and the cops find the two of them tied to each other by rope, and they tell the cops Super Witch did this. Wouldn't the head witch make it a punishable offense for witches to act like this? I assumed that was the case because that's the only explanation for why this doesn't already happen all the time, so people would already know about witches. She even calls herself a witch in her superhero name, which she should know she's not allowed to do by now. Wouldn't she know she'd be found out by Merlin and punished? Then Hilda stupidly tells the guy to drop the gun instead of instantly using magic. Lucky for her, he's so shocked that he wastes time saying he's heard about her first. So she has the time to turn his gun into a flower and punch him. The cops say that Super Witch is really bringing the crooks in. I have to assume the reason the cops aren't happy instead of thinking of her as an illegal vigilante is that the guys she had captured are all fugitives, so they'd let anybody capture them. But pretty soon she'd run out of fugitives. Some of the mob leaves Riverdale, which is surprisingly smart. Why doesn't every criminal in Superman just leave his city? Super Witch becomes the #1 guest on TV talk shows. But some criminals decide to kidnap Sabrina to get to her, because apparently she was somehow stupid enough to reveal to everyone that she's got loved ones, which doesn't happen for this very reason. I guess they assume that Sabrina is from the mortal side of her family. Sabrina thinks she can't use her magic because she can't touch her ear as she's tied up. Zelda tells Hilda about a note on her door about what happened. Hilda gets called and told to take a long trip or else Sabrina gets it. Why is Sabrina unmuffled now? Why is the kid self-sacrificial enough to tell Hilda not to listen to them? Hilda somehow thinks the only thing she has to do is leave Riverdale, rather than teleporting Sabrina to her. In fact, you'd think the criminals would have known right away that she could teleport her to her and not even bothered. I guess she never teleported in front of people as Super Witch. Hilda passes over the South Pole and someone calls the boss about it. And it turns out Sabrina's not going to be let go, but then Zelda shows up to save her, not getting hurt from kicking through a window because she's got a magical costume apparently. For no reason, she doesn't instantly focus on using magic to debilitate the criminals, and instead unties Sabrina first. Zelda uses magic to make Sabrina have a costume, and Sabrina summons Salem in a costume, and they all beat up the bad guys who let her untie Sabrina with no fuss. Sabrina gets told that's the last one and is sad because she was just beginning to enjoy herself. I thought she didn't want to see anyone get hurt. Hilda shows up for no reason, so I have to assume Zelda called her here telepathically. They get told they cleaned up the crooks in Riverdale, and Hilda says it's going to be dull not being a superhero anymore. Is that supposed to be why Sabrina won't get kidnapped again? Because they cleaned up the crooks? Every single one of them somehow? What should happen now is that Hilda casts a spell to make everyone forget Super Witch has a family to target. Otherwise, they couldn't just go back to the status quo after this. We should see Merlin cast forgetfulness spells. Sabrina says they could become super investigators to look for missing things like her homework. Can't she just warp the homework to her? Why doesn't the story end with her aunts warping it to her? This story was about Hilda getting mugged and somehow not replacing the pizza boxes with magic and stopping the muggers with magic immediately. And then she decides to become a superhero, and there seems to be no consequences from Merlin for this, making me wonder why this doesn't happen with witches all the time. Why don't people know about witches already? I guess he doesn't interfere in these matters because he knows they're always temporary. But it's only temporary because somehow Hilda was stupid enough to tell people she's got a family to target off screen. Zelda saves Sabrina from the kidnapping, and I guess the reason Hilda gives up is because she doesn't want that to happen to Sabrina again. But why would that make it stop happening? They know she's associated with Super Witch now. She should have ended the story casting a spell to make people forget that part. But somehow Hilda doesn't feel like being a superhero anymore, after she'd inevitably cast that spell. Wouldn't every witch be doing this? It was enjoyable seeing some criminals get bested and captured, so I like this story. As usual. Little Archie, issue 78. One Too Many. These panels are from the 50 Magical Stories Sabrina collection on Kindle. Miss Grundy says she's gonna leave the classroom for a few minutes. She doesn't explain why, so the story feels forced. Jughead gets paper thrown at his head by Reggie for no reason, and Jughead doesn't want Reggie to get him in trouble so he wouldn't be able to get a bunch of ice cream and Pop-Teats later. Then Reggie opens the window to get a snowball to throw at Jughead. It's insanely predictable that Jughead's gonna end up in trouble, and that'll be terrible. It seems forced that Reggie would act like this because he has nothing to gain and nothing against him. Sabrina magically creates a snowball for Jughead to throw at Reggie, when she knows he doesn't want to get in trouble. And she could have easily just brainwashed Reggie into being quiet and minding his own business. The snowball hits Grundy and she insists on only punishing Jughead. And somehow we don't find out that anybody in class told her about how Reggie was behaving and gouged him into it. They would hate him enough to get him in trouble for throwing that snowball right away. Sabrina wishes there could be two Jugheads. One to stay in detention and one to go to Pop-Teats. So she casts a spell for it, and what's hopefully the real Jughead warps to Sabrina wondering how he got here, and she distracts him telling him to get to Pop-Teats. Sabrina immediately foreshadows that things are going to go wrong because she says she likes helping people with her magic. If she had a brain, she'd follow Jughead. Why can't she want to enjoy the Sunday special too? But it makes sense that she wouldn't anticipate that he'd want to go back to class. He remembers he left his afternoon snack in his desk and decides to go back for it. I guess she didn't hear him say this because he was far enough away from her. Grundy gets what she deserves because she sees two Jugheads and freaks out and screams, and Weatherby sees them too. Surprisingly, he's braver than she is, and all he says is that the two of them can go now. But he only wants to see one of them tomorrow. I love that. Somehow the two Jugheads don't question how this is even possible, as if they already know about witches, and freak out Archie and Pop-Teat, who comes to silly conclusions about why this is happening. So he has to close the store because the two Jugheads ate everything in the shop. When the Jugheads want to beat up Reggie, Sabrina teleports the other Jughead away, and Jughead's at least smart enough to realize that nice things tend to go on when Sabrina's around. He's smart enough to know it's Sabrina's fault and not one of the many other students in his class. This story was about Reggie bullying Jughead for no reason after Miss Grundy leaves the classroom for a few minutes for no reason. And Sabrina gets mad enough to magically give Jughead a snowball to throw at Reggie, instead of just magically making Reggie stop misbehaving, when it's obvious to everyone that Jughead's not lashing out at him to avoid getting in trouble. Thankfully, Sabrina feels guilty after all of those plot holes and decides to cast a spell so that the real Jughead will get to go to Pop-Teats while fake Jughead's in detention. I have to assume Grundy wasn't looking when the second Jughead appeared in detention and then the real one got warped to Sabrina, because she only sees the two of them together after Jughead decides to go get his snack from his desk. Miraculously, Jughead stays completely calm about his second hymn, and even Weatherby is calm enough to just tell them to leave detention, instead of just saying he didn't see that. I assume he's just so used to seeing magic because of Sabrina that he can handle it better now. That was a fun story. Jughead got to go to Pop-Teats after all, but it still had a really annoying beginning, so it's hard not to stay mad at that. Little Archie, issue 80. The Flower of Youth. Sabrina wants to smell some flowers from Reggie that spray her with water. Thankfully, Grundy sees this and sends him to the principal, who gives him 6 months of detention. Good. Somehow, Sabrina thinks this is the first time she's felt sorry for Reggie. Sabrina thinks the joke wasn't that bad. I mean, it's not as bad as putting paint on her eye. And thinks that if teachers could be kids for a day, they'd see things in a different light. But I can't sympathize with Reggie here. Sabrina casts a spell to turn Weatherby into a kid, and Grundy tells him to get back into his classroom and pushes him, even though she wants to know where he belongs. Weatherby doesn't get believed about his identity, of course, and she laughs, saying that he has hair. Grundy gets turned into a kid too because Sabrina feels sorry for Weatherby. Grundy still has white hair for some reason. She says that since she's a kid now, she can give him something she wanted to for a long time, a punch. I guess what she means is that she thinks she's dreaming, or will be made to forget this. Or she thinks that she'll never be an adult again, and if so, if she's not able to work for him anymore, she might as well punch him. When the coach and music teacher see what's happening, they try to stop the fight. Sabrina turns them into kids too, and because Weatherby's mad at them for trying to stop the fight, he starts fighting with the music teacher, and Sabrina tells them they're not supposed to fight because they're teachers. Weatherby conveniently admits that they've been acting like little kids. Then they smell something from the lunchroom and run over to it, and get told to get out because it's not lunch yet. Sabrina turns Miss Beasley into a kid too, and it's lampshaded that she looks basically the same. This is because Sabrina doesn't know what she looked like as a kid. You'd think it would scan Miss Beasley's brain to find out. Same goes for Grundy. Sabrina really went down the slippery slope here. But at least her appalling, reckless use of magic makes more sense because she's a kid. Sabrina says she gives up because she can't get their attention, and casts a spell to change them back. They don't remember the events of the story and just decide to eat, which they're allowed to do now because they're adults, apparently. This story was about Sabrina feeling sorry for Reggie for getting 6 months of detention for pranking her when she did nothing to annoy him. So she easily comes to the conclusion that if she made Weatherby turn into a kid, he'd know why Reggie pranked her and be lenient on him. Or she could cut out the middleman and change his mind with magic directly. But either way, Reggie doesn't deserve that leniency, and most kids wouldn't do what Reggie does. Sabrina goes down the slippery slope and turns everyone working at the school into a kid, without them questioning how there could be a magic flower to do that. Just to see them continue to antagonize each other. So Sabrina turns them back to normal and doesn't accomplish what she wanted to for Reggie. Good thing. Little Archie, issue 81. Hats off. Sabrina sees signs on the chocolate shop saying that it's going out of business, and she confronts Pop-Tate on it, and he tells her that everyone's going across the street to Burger Palace instead, even though his shop still sells ice cream. And there's no indication that place sells ice cream sundaes too. I guess it does. Sabrina considerately warns Betty to make sure Jughead's sitting down when he hears the news. Once again, one of the aunts assumes Sabrina's caught a cold when she's sniffling. Her aunts are confident they can help because they're witches. They should have known they'd scare him by teleporting to him. He runs away, saying he's been eating too much butter pecan. He stops when he's told they want to help him, and Zelda says they can start by picking the place up, using magic to do so in front of him. Hilda summons a cauldron and tells him to bring them all the ice cream and syrup in the store. He says he's never seen sundaes made like this before, and she seems to be making a potion. All of Riverdale ends up brainwashed into wanting to buy from his shop. Some others think their babies want them to buy from the shop for them. It turns out the guy running for mayor wasn't affected by Hilda's spell, and neither is the other guy near him. So how does the magic potion determine who's going to get affected by the brainwashing? I hope these people are going to be spending money they can afford to waste. That's all that bothers me about this. Then the fact that a few people might be opposed to eating meat and are lactose intolerant, so there'd be nothing they could eat from his store without regretting it. All of the passengers in the airplane want the plane landed immediately so that they could get sundaes. When Hilda helps, she really goes all out to the point of causing chaos. Even the president wants to head for Riverdale. Why? He's all the way in Washington and the spell still affects him? Realistically, there's a huge line, and someone questions why the president of calorie counters is eating the sundae. Even Hilda's magic can't keep up with all of the orders. Pop-Tate closes the store and says they need to close shop to rest. Sabrina shows up holding sundaes on a tray and says that they can call them Mondays instead. A week later, Pop-Tate says he doesn't know how to thank them. And the story doesn't end with them being made to forget their witches. That's the kind of gutsiness you'll never see in later comics. Hilda and Zelda feel good about doing nice things for Pop-Tate, and Sabrina tells her aunts the next day that the chocolate shop was closed for vacation because it made so much money. This story's about Sabrina telling her aunts that Pop-Tate's going out of business, and her aunts have the guts to help him with their magic instead of always being fixated on hiding it over everything else. So Hilda makes a potion that brainwashes a lot of people into wanting to give his business some business. And what's confusing is that it's not explained what the rules are about who isn't affected, and even the president is, when the mayor isn't. I guess it wasn't his turn yet. Despite Hilda having trouble keeping up with all of the orders with her magic, everything works out a week later, aside from the fact that he realistically took a vacation because he made so much money.